All right, I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to Big Book, uh, Great Reality Book Study. Sorry, I almost said the wrong one. Um, so since we haven't really looked deeply, we looked really deeply in the early AA. I want to start off the study by reading what's called the um, Willington Preamble, and this was from 1944. And there's different versions of it, and there's ones that argue if this is the right one, but I'm gonna go ahead and read it anyways. Um, but this preamble was from 44, and it's a controversial one when it came out because it's so straightforward. Um, this preamble was widely accepted everywhere until World Service in the 50s or so came up with the one you see, the more friendly version you see today. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this. This is the Willingman preamble. Willingman. So says, we have gathered here because we have faced with the fact that we are powerless over alcohol and unable to do anything about it without help of a power greater than ourselves. We feel that each person's religious view, if any, are their own affair. The simple purpose of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is to show what may be done to enlist the aid of a power greater than ourselves, regardless of what our individual conception of that power is. In order to form a habit of depending upon or referring all we have to do to that power, we must first apply ourselves with some diligence. By often repeating these acts, they become habitual and help become natural to us. We all have come to know that as alcoholics, we are suffering from a serious illness for which medicine has no cure. Our condition may be the result of an allergy, which makes us different from other people. It also has been by any treatment which we are permanently cured. The only relief to offer is abstinence, and the second is abstinence. There, there are no dues. The only requirement for membership is desire to stop drinking. Each member shares his own debt by helping others to recover. AA is an alcoholic, an anonymous, uh, Alcoholics Anonymous. We go through the application of adherence to the A program for foreseeing the use of any of all alcoholic beverages of any kind. The moment he takes so much as one drink of whether it be beer, wine, spirits, or anything else, he automatically loses his status as a membership of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA is not interested in sobering up drunks who are not sincere. We have a way out, which we can absolutely agree upon, which you can join in Brotherly Homeless Action. Rarely has a person failed, has thoroughly followed our program. Those who do not recover are people who will not simply cannot give themselves to the simple program. Now you may like this program or you may not, but the fact remains it works, and it's our only chance of recovery. There's a vast amount of fun about it all. Some people might be shocked or assuming worldliness and levity, but just underneath it, there lies deadly earnestness and full realization that we must first things first with each of us, and remember to drink as a die. Faith must work 24 hours a day or we perish. In order to set our tone for this group, we must bow our heads in meditation. We already did that. I wish to remind you that whatever is said here expresses our own individual opinion. We do not speak for A as a whole. If you don't have a big book, it's time you bought one. Read it, study it, live it, scatter it, then learn from it what it means to be of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's kind of a long preamble, but we don't read a preamble in here. We have Rob's read the preamble of ours, but I always like that one because it's so straightforward in there. So, last time we got into the big book finally, and we looked at the cover, we looked at the title page, the cover is blank, and that's how much we know about recovery when we get here. And it's also an open mind. And the title page, we saw how many thousand men and women have recovered from alcoholism, which is that recovered word is how strong it is. It means you have a hold of something, and how it's controversial because the people who don't have a hold of it don't believe it's possible. You know, we looked deeply at the circle and triangle, and we talked about how it's no longer official AA. But the most important thing with the circle and triangle is each corner of the triangle, each line of the triangle represents unity, service, recovery, with 12 traditions, 12 concepts, 12 steps. Without those three, unity, service, recovery, the circle's no longer there. The circle's infinity. It keeps going and going. So tonight, to kind of continue, we're going to look at the table and contents. So um, first, we're going to look at the page next to it. So I'm going to put up a slide here. And this one, oops, hold on. This is the very first one from 1939. You know, we see Works Publishing. It says the Church Street Annex, Post Office Box 658 in New York City. And it says this one is printed in 1944. So it's a fifth printing. You can see all the different printings they did. One thing that's always stands out is you know, the AA had a gap amongst how fast they're selling big books. So the first printing, it only, you know, 1939, they didn't print another one until 41. But then look at all of a sudden March, then less than a year later, a little over a year later in June of the next year, boom, another one. And then March of 43, another one, you know, more printings. So they were starting to roll out pretty good. So with the first edition, there was 16 printings in all, 300,000 made. And this is the second edition. It's kind of fuzzy copy here a little bit, but you know, came out in 1955. You got a little bit of different stuff here. You got Alcoholics Anonymous World Service now because they moved their down the street and started that, and that's New York City, still in the same place. PO Box has on there, all rights reserved, and this would be the 10th printing. So from you know till 1974, there was 1.1 million, almost 1.12, 1.2 million copies of that made. So this is the third edition, same stuff. Say, you know, it's, you know, they really started to fly out, you know, with different ones here. This one doesn't really tell the different printings of the third edition, but it tells you, oh, third, new and revised, 1976. This is a 22nd printing in 1985. So with the third edition, we're up in 2001, they had almost 20 million. What always stood out to me about that? There's only the, you know, at that time, you know, 2001, there's about 2 million members of Alcoholics Anonymous. For years, there was that many, but there's 20 million big books. Let's keep that thought for a second. So we'll get to the fourth edition. Look at all these copies there. And let me see. This is the fourth edition. This is another third edition one right here. So the fourth edition revised, there's a lot of them there. Oops, there's a lot of them there. And basically, you know, about, let me see what I did wrong here. Hold on a second. Oops, maybe I don't know. Oh, there it is. So 2001. So fourth edition, it doesn't tell you how many there are, but there's up to came out 2001. You know, there's a lot of different stuff on this page. There's a lot of different stuff on this page. The first edition, first printing was October 2001. The 18th printing in 2006, 30 million copies. Today, it's over 50 million. Now, taking in this for a minute, A sticks to the fact that they have 2.5 million, maybe 3 million members. Maybe they don't want to worry about recovery rates. They don't want to know. But let's say that hypothetically it's 7 million members, right? And that's pushing it. But there's 50 million big books printed since 2001. Where are all these big books? Because it shows you that this is a revolving door. This thing keeps moving. It's a revolving door. Alcoholics Anonymous. More people come in than stay in, you know. but it's a lot of big books. It's also a lot of rehabs and stuff. But the it talks about AA General Service Conference approved literature on there. They started putting that there. Alcoholics Anonymous and AA registered trademarks of AA World Service. And it gets the interesting part, the Library of Congress. So our Library of Congress number, you can see at the bottom there. And it's, so I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but it's 20119, blah, blah. So, and that's printed in the United States of America. So Library of Congress is the largest library in the world. Millions of books, films, videos, audio recordings, photos, and newspapers. And it's the library is a main research center for U.S. Congress and politicians to use. It's the home of the U.S. Copyright Office as well. Very interesting. So registering your book in Library of Congress means your book will be assigned to libraries across the United States. So that's pretty much what it means. I'm sure you can get your book in libraries, other means than that. So now we're going to look at the table of contents. So the table of contents is rather interesting. So you have, it's not really called table of contents, it's called contents. Here's the contents, and you know what contents means. You know, another word for that is, subjects, you could say, is contents, or whatever you want to put on there. So chapter, pages, and I'm going to mention the 12 steps that are in those pages. So you have doctor's opinion, XXV, XXII, XXV to XXVII, and that contains the first step. The most important ingredients are in that chapter. Now, when I showed up to Alcoholics Anonymous, like I did a lot of times when I came to AA, I skipped that. Why did I skip it? Because I always skipped the Roman numeral stuff at the beginning. It was boring. But then I finally read it. I heard a guy read it at a book study and it blew my mind. And I've read this chapter thousands of times because the book studies I've done for 20 something years and taken a lot of people through this process. First, page 1 to 16, you have Bill's story. Chapter 1, I'm sorry, page 116. So unmanageability, the first half, up to page 8, and 9 to 16 is about recovery or spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it, right? So the unmanageability is 1 through 8, recovery is 8 through 16. Then you have, perfectly titled chapter. There's a solution. That's pages 17 to 29. And it contains steps 1 and 2. Very little 2, but you have step 1, 17 to 26, step 2, 27 through 29, and that's the Roland Hazard story because it comes about the spiritual awakening. Then we shift over to more about alcoholism. So we're still on step 1. 13 pages on step 1. It's kind of telling us something here. So more about alcoholism contains step 1, and it's mostly about the subtle insanity prior to the first drink. Why we pick it up even though we shouldn't, or all things that go against it. We agnostics, this chapter 4, 44 through 57, very important information in this chapter. It's one that you can keep reading over and over again and still gain more insight. That's step 2. So now we get to the real meat and potatoes here of the program, or taters, what they call it some places. That's 58 through 71. And so step 3 and 4, well, the first 58 through 60, I just say 12 steps because he's talking about him. He's got to introduce him. He's got to have them written down. But then step 3 is pages 60 through 63. And then the clear-cut directions as to how to do step 4 is 63 to 71. Maybe you could say technically to 70 because 71 is more of a, thank you for reading this thing. So into action, chapter 6. Now this one definitely goes against the contrary that we do this program lying down or take a nap or do one step a month. Because it's, look at the title of the chapter. It's not called Into Thinking, it's called Into Action or Into Planning or Into Napping or anything like that. 72 through 88. Now that contains steps 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's a lot of information in those pages. You got, so step 5 is 72 through 75. Step 6 and 7 is 76. It's funny, the most vital information in the book right there is I think it's 13 lines. And that's it. Beautiful. And a prayer. And then we have steps 8 and 9, 76 through 84. Step 10, 84 through 85. And then step 11, 85 through 88. That contains a 24-hour plan. Especially 84 through 88, some of the most vital information you could have if you want continuous long-term recovery. I was explaining to someone today, I've been on this wellness plan, eating wise and stuff and exercising and stuff like that. And I have to go with the recovery mindset because I'm not into losing a bunch of weight. I'm into maintaining the weight I lose. So I go, my goal is to get to a 10, 11 aspect of it, continuing it, finding the energy in it and giving it away. And it's the same thing, that these to do here with working with others. It's all about, so this is not going to tell you how to sponsor necessarily page by page. I just showed you all that stuff, all this other stuff, and all this other stuff here is telling me how to sponsor along with going to the steps, right? People say, where's the sponsorship guide in there? The whole book is 12. There's some stuff in there that I admit it's kind of outdated because the way things are done, but 89 through 103 is about working with a new drunk, period. And then some happy stuff in there about walking side by side with the person and where we go now and how we do. It's a great chapter. It's a great chapter. If you go to our YouTube channel, Chris S., our friend of Big Book Compendium, does a whole workshop on just on that chapter alone, and he modernizes it a lot, which is really good. So what stands out the most here in this table of contents is that 1 and 2, there's a whole lot of pages. And the reason why he wants us to go on this, I like to call it an investigation. I mean, he wants us to be convinced, but he wants us to go on this investigation. An investigation is to do careful, I say, research, but not just that, but closely examine details and facts. You got to have facts, right? And why we do that? So we can reach a firm conclusion. Research, examination, investigation, research, examination, details, facts, in order to come to the conclusion because of all that. If you don't, if you don't know what the problem is, how can you fix it? So we must investigate. I'll give a little analogy that I always liked. So I'm going to go on a drive to the mountains with Ollie, right? We're going to decide we're going to go drive up the mountains and have a sabbatical up there, right? And we stop at a remote area high in the middle of nowhere. And we go out and go to the rest stop and rest and whatever else. And when we get back to the car, I put the keys in the ignition and click, 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 click. That sound we love there. Now, we know there's a problem. The car doesn't start. But the question is, why? So what do? We go on an investigation, what the problem is. We open the hood of the car, look around. We look at everything. We play with the wires. We check the starter, the alternator. A firm investigation. We come to the conclusion, right, that the battery is dead. So after all we know, do we stand there staring at it for 30 years and hope the car's just going to start and be and run like it's better than before? And say, oh, well, that's the problem, blah, blah, blah. Do we put air in the tires? That wouldn't be a solution, right? Do we put gas in the car? That wouldn't be the solution. So, we know what the problem is. The battery's dead. Lack of power, powerless. Solution, power. We lack the means. So we've done that investigation. We can't fix it. Second investigation, how and where do we find the power? And Ali goes, hey, I got AAA. Calls up AAA. They get there 3 hours later and they jumpstart the car and we get power. But we make the decision. So we have to make a decision to call them first. I forgot to say that. The road service. And he takes the action by calling them. And then 3 hours later they show up. But we get something called results. Investigation, decision, action, results. So I'm going to close this down. So our investigation begins with doctor's opinion and goes to page, goes from 17 to page 60. I'm sorry, it goes doctor's opinion 17 to page 60, ending with the ABCs. That's 52 pages of investigation. Here's the truth. It's sad. I don't know. When people walk into whether fellowship they go to, they don't have a clue what alcohol they're, what an alcoholic or addict or whatever they are. If they don't make that investigation, they will never know what the problem is. And since they don't know what the problem is, they got no solution. So guess what happens next? They only think they know what the problem is, so they're going to try solution after solution after solution and they're going to do the ones they only think are comfortable for them. Many solutions they'll try until they realize maybe I should go back to that place. And so we have 35 pages to investigate this problem. And once we know we're powerless, we investigate where and how we find that power. That's We Agnostics, 13 pages. And we know what we need to do. Do we stand around again for 30 years until we make that decision? Some people do, and they never make the decision. We make a decision to seek power, and we immediately take action of 4 through 9 to seek that power. What happens? We get results. Power. Simple. Investigation, decision, action, results. Investigation, decision, action, results. And you either become convinced by doing this investigation or you don't. And without the big book, we get 6,000 answers of what an alcoholic is from everywhere else in the world. I went to rehab 7 times and every rehab was different. Oh, it's your genetics, it's this, it's because you're sad today, and all this stuff. The only one that ever made sense was allergy. Thank God for this book. And the rest of the contents are the stories in the back of the book. And the biggest difference between the stories in the back of the book and the first 164 pages is, we've had 4 editions. So the first, 164 pages have never changed. The stories do. The stories in the first edition are excellent, absolutely really good. I'd highly recommend you read them. Second edition, I wouldn't put them as high as those, but they're still really good. Third edition, okay, because they started in the first and second edition. You could read those stories if you had, for you to understand them, you had to understand the process. So they started watering them down in the third edition to make them more so anyone can understand what they want to do. So that's not fourth edition. They changed a lot of stuff. They wanted to have diversity, so they try to get every type of person they can do to have it, not looking whether they're alcoholic or not. I don't know. I mean, a guy out here to the story in the fourth edition, and the guy doesn't have a clue what recovery is. But whatever. The stories there are anyone can understand them. My mom could read them and understand them, and she's not in the program. So we know there's those who just go to meetings and that works for them, right? We know people just walk in the doors and oh, I feel welcome. That's their recovery. And a lot of those people take parts from the book and believe that's all they need. They take, They quote the stories. They interpret it as program. I said it, you know, it's their right to be an Alcoholics Anonymous, just like any of us. But it sends the wrong message to that real alcoholic who's bleeding, the newcomer, who desperately needs change, who desperately needs that allergy obsession, like I did in the program. You know, I'm not trying to tear apart these stories, but I'm going to do it a little bit. There's two stories that often get quoted as program, and those personal stories are in the back of the book, and they're exactly what they are, stories. You won't find directions in those stories in the back of the book that we desperately need to remove this obsession for victory over alcohol. They're just stories. It's just experiences. So the one is, you don't have to go there, but it's 552, bondage from self, freedom from bondage. I'm going to read this really quick. Now, let me read it. If you have a resentment and want to be free, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. If you ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Ask for health and their prosperity and their happiness, and you will be free. Even when you don't really want it for them, and prayers are only words, and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyways. Do it for 2 weeks, and you will find you have come to mean it and want it for them, and you will realize that there, where you used to feel bitterness and resentment and hatred, you now feel compassion, understanding, and love. There's not bad directions there, but it's not the program. And so many people will say, come to me. I got a lot of sponsees, and I got guys that are like, we work together each week, 10, 11, 12. I got guys that sponsor like crazy. I got guys that shift away and come back and do it. And they always come back with this. I've been praying for 2 weeks. I still feel miserable. But there are bad directions in there. First off, where's this located? In the back of the book. It's not an inaction. It's not a first 160 page. It's a story in the back. Now, I don't think the guy who, when he wrote this story, intended it to be programmed. My personal experience is people who follow this passage up to a T without program, do not want to truly fix the problem, like make amends and stuff. They don't want to do inventory or make amends. Like what page 66 says, we solve these resentments by master, but how? We cannot wish them away any more than alcohol. So resentments must be mastered. Master means to have dominance over power or something. Is that going to happen by trying to pray resentments away? Now, I'm speaking for myself here. So if we can't wish away a resentment, how can I pray one away? Right? If I'm blocked from God because of resentment, how can I connect to God to pray it away? I'm just speaking. We master resentments by becoming aware of the driving forces of those resentments, like we did for the first time and continue to step 12. If I cannot shake it, I need to go make amends. And sure, I pray for people all the time in step 11. I pray for people I resent, but it doesn't take away the resentment. Something else to think about, if resentments, like I said, if they block my thinking, like I said, how can I even pray? But what if in those 2 weeks, more resentments happen and more resentments happen? That's what happens. We need to do the program. We need to be free. When it comes up, talk to your sponsor about it and keep doing it. And the more you do it, it's different. This is a program of action where we get rid of stuff quickly. Boom, boom. I don't want to, we're not here to dance around having enemies anymore and resenting people. I don't want to mess around with resentments for 2 weeks. Just me. And I'm biased on this thing because my grant sponsor, who did tons of book studies, was very outspoken on this. And we're trying to be max on service of God and people about us. I'm not saying don't pray. I'm saying, get rid of it through the steps and then pray. And can pray for the people by all means. And I think that's what the guy meant in there. The other story is most quoted, and you could probably guess which one I'm going to talk about. It's on T-shirts. It's on mugs. It's, It has tons of wind in the sails in the room. So much that if I talk to someone who's struggling and they say, acceptance is the answer to all my problems. Tons of wind. It's not the first 164 pages of the book. It's acceptance is the answer. It's from a story in the back of the book called Acceptance Was the Answer. It's way I forget the guy's name who wrote it, but he even came forward and said he didn't intend it to go this route, right? And there was a fight whether to take it out of the big book in the fourth edition, but people wanted it. If you want to follow along, it's on page 417, and it says, "And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, or thing, which is exactly the way it's supposed to be in this moment." This doesn't resemble the program. And from this we had born powers of people, place, and the things we hear all the time, right? And which is not the program either. It kind of peas in the soup of the program, so to speak. This doesn't even resemble the program. Where's God in that right there? It's got even mentioned there. It is about playing God when I'm trying to fix things on my own. If I'm trying to fix things on my own, I'm playing God. I gave up that a long time ago. So when I'm disturbed, I do inventory. I find my mistakes. I talk to someone about it. Let God remove it, make amends. Sometimes not as easy as that, but that's the way it goes. But the big book tells us the solution is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and that's in 10. And then we have 11. The solution that awakens us to God, grows us with God, and keeps us close to God. So we find peace and serenity from God, accepting that person, place, or thing as exactly the way it's supposed to be in that moment. That's not the program. It's not going to change me. It's not in the first 94 pages. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems. It sounds great. It sounds cool. But does it have the same, are you going to have that rocket ship experience? Well, I just accept my job sucks. I just, I can go get a new one. I just accept my marriage is bad. I can get a divorce or counseling. I just accept I have, I punch walls and break things. No, I can go, I can do these steps. I just accept fear runs my life. I just accept I'm always going to be recovering or have guilt or harm another. I mean, if my neighbor's dog poops in my lawn every day and I just accept it, guess what's going to be all over my lawn? A bunch of crap. If I just accept that I have a bunch of resentments, or I just accept and I look at people differently, there's a bunch of crap. And that's the truth. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems. Maybe a few, not all. It's a self-help tool right there. It might help you if you're doing the steps, but you got to look at yourself once in a while. Spiritual tools such as the steps, is like different. If all I'm doing is modifying my behavior, I can go get that. Might as well go to anger management. Remember, this is a God help program, not a self-help program. Acceptance, it's the answer falls in the same category. Like it says, powers, people, places, and things. It sounds good, but the most important question is, does it work? All I'm going to say is what the big book says: half measures avail us nothing. Easier, softer ways, middle of the road solutions. People often, my grandma said this, and I said it a minute ago. People have been peeing in the soup for too long in this program, and people wonder why the program was watered down. I love the stories in the back of the book. They're great, but they're just what they are, stories. I love the stories of the meetings. I never walked out of a meeting going, man, I feel better than I did when I walked in if I have a resentment. No, what I usually get out of a good share is I need to do something about it. It motivates me. I think that's why they had it in there. If it's not contained in the first 164 pages, it's not part of the program. Now, if you can stay sober off those stories, great, great. Hats off to you. I can't pull it off. I know many of you can't pull it off, but I never forgot one of my best friends who was struggling mentally, not drinking yet, and asked when I asked him what was the last time he did inventory, his response was, acceptance is the answer to all my problems. And he goes, when I'm disturbed, blah, blah, blah. I lovingly, calmly told him, you know, it's not going to bring you to the same place as inventory. Sadly, he didn't listen, and he killed himself. So there's things that I've seen happen in this program, and it's a struggle. I told someone today it shouldn't even called Alcoholics Anonymous, it should be called Emotions Anonymous, because that's what we're looking at here. So let's look at the preface. I'm going to be on the table of contents and look at the preface. So it says this is the 4th edition. If you have a different one, we'll say something different. Of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Some of us already read, but the first edition appeared in 1939, and it's following 16 years, more than 300,000 copies went in circulation. Second edition, publication in 1955, which is a total of more than 1.5, 1.1 million, let's say. The third edition, which came to the press in 76, was, like I said, almost 20 million. All in all, formats, and like I said, the 4th edition is over 50. This is the part that I like the most, is that because this book has become the basic text of our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there's a strong sentiment against any radical changes being made to it. First thing I want to mention here is a strong sentiment against any radical changes being made. Sentiment means more, than opinion, but it can also mean strong emotional opinion. So they're giving us strong, when I say sentiment, they're saying we have a strong emotional opinion that it should not be changed. So what they're saying here is right, is because this book has helped so many, they're pleading with us never to change it. They know that it worked for them. They wouldn't have written this book. You don't change the recipe. Now let's look at another thing in this paragraph, the word textbook. So the difference between a textbook and a novel is a textbook has precise directions and instructions. A textbook is detailed study guide, has instructions in order to learn facts, methods, I'm going to learn about a branch of a subject. Pretty straightforward, right? You're not going to find that in a novel. A novel is a story. This group is pretty straightforward. It's a big book study. We're studying the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. So I hope you brought a big book. It'd be pretty hard to follow along if something different. If this is a physics course and you show up with a chemistry book, it'd be pretty hard to follow along. You'd be lost. It's kind of like when I say, we're going to read all the 12 and 12. Let's go to page 70. And someone goes, wait a minute, you're on the wrong page, because they're looking in the big book. It happens, and say you're looking in the wrong book. But there's a textbook is what we have here. And maybe that's one of the problems. We have been looking in the wrong place. So we're getting the right answers. The solutions here. Clear-cut directions. Clear-cut directions will not be found on the wall that we stared at for so long, with the steps on there. That's the short form of the steps. Like the traditions, you have the short form of traditions and long form. This on the wall, the meetings is the short form steps. You also see them on page 60, right? The long form is the book. The long form steps are in the book. So clear-cut directions. This book has clear-cut, detailed directions how to do the steps. Very straightforward, easy to understand, clearly outlined directions how to overcome alcoholism. If we follow these directions, we get results if we're ready, right? I'll give you a perfect example when, when people talk about being ready, you know, I went to college after high school. I had no business setting foot in college, but I could live somewhere for free if I did. So I went to junior college and I got C's and D's and stuff, and I did not care. And dropped out eventually. And I took classes like weight training and music. When I went back to school 12 years later for counseling and psychology, I got A's because I wanted to be there. I was ready to put everything into it. Either ready to do these steps or you're not. If you're still sitting on the third step, or you've done the third step, your sponsor, and you haven't gotten to step 4 because you're not ready. I used to get mad when sponsees wouldn't do the steps, wouldn't do step 4. I give them step 3, and my sponsor goes, "They're just not ready." And I go, "Oh wow, willingness." You people all the time say, don't listen to the book thumpers. You know, that the book is open for interpretation. You heard that a lot, right? The one the one thing about a textbook that's common with that has common with all their textbook is there, like I said, detailed instructions. It's not open to interpretation because the directions are precise and clear cut. When directions are precise and clear cut in a textbook, it's not open for interpretation. It's there. Why would else do they write it? So the goal with our textbook is the same with any textbook, to transfer information from one mind to the next. Chain stop, keep it going. That's what they did when they wrote this book. They put in black and white so they could keep it intact, you know, and so you can get the same results that they got 84 years ago when the book was written. When the book was written, it's not take what we want and leave the rest. Let's go back to the book. Therefore, the first portion of this volume, talking about the textbook, described the AA recovery program as been left largely untouched in the course of renovations made for the second, third, and fourth editions. Where it says AA program, it says, where it says AA program, it's the it and how it works is the AA program, the 12 steps. That's what we're going to learn. It's not how Steve's recovery program works. It's 12 steps. The section called Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact, just as originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William Duncan Silkworth, our society's medical benefactor. The biggest revision of this, was in the second printing of from the first printing, the first edition in 1941. And I mentioned this before. They changed the 12 step from having had a spiritual experience to having had a spiritual awakening, and this was done because members thought they were, I'm not having this burning bush experience like Bill did, and spectacular upheaval and all this stuff. And they also added spiritual experience awakening, spiritual penance in the back. It describes the difference between awakening experience. We'll be covering that here eventually, but um, in the last 15 years, I hear people talking about big time about revising the book. I was in a meeting not long ago before the pandemic, and the thing got passed around. Do you think the big book needs to be modernized? But my question is always the same. I can understand changing one of the traditions, putting internet on there, press freedom of film and internet or something. That could make sense. But my question is, who would do it? I mean, would we just recruit the writers of the grapevines, or historians, or the people who wrote Living Silver? We have this like diverse group that represents every single person in AA, modern recovery. What I mean, the meeting makers, we got to have them in there too. Recovered alcoholics, we have them in there. We even let recovered alcoholics be in there. Would it be based on time? You got to have 20 years to work on this modernization of the big book. If it was based on time, what would happen to Bill? He had 3 years when he wrote this book. And I've heard the reason I bring that up, because I heard people say that if they do a modernization, they gotta get people with 30 years. I know people with 30 years that know anything. It's true. So, for the people that helped, that the government people help Bill, had some had under a year. But again, what needs to be modernized in this book? That's my question. Let me think. Has alcoholism changed? Addiction changed? No. I mean, there's other ideas. You can look clear in the brain, but keep it simple. The allergy obsession. Silkworth's like, so his illness concept's never changed. The solution hasn't changed. The results of doing the steps is the same. The program is the same. What do they want to take out? I mean, that's what scares me too. Next, where it's like next at once. How about they could take out first opportunity, or new, or willingness, or sanity, or restored? Sanity's been restored. Or how about they could take out the word all, or reborn, or may you find him now? Let's take that out and replace it, like take your time, go slow, always recovering, and read that's a part of recovery. Always sick. Or I heard a person say one time in a meeting recently, I wish they put the word optional in the book. But would they modernize it to fit current standards, easier, softer? I mean, who knows? This is all theory. But we're overcoming a hopeless state of mind and body. If you take away that as a forefront, it'd be determined by time or whatever else. I mean, this big book is flawless. You wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't believe in it. How can you add anything to what's flawless? That was placed in black and white so the message could stay intact, just like a Declaration of Independence or whatever you want to call it. Other books. The danger of removing and revising takes away the magic. It stands the test of time. Time tested and people approved. That's what this book is. Time tested, people approved. Back to the book. The second edition in 1955 added the appendices, and the 12 steps, 12 traditions and directions, getting in touch with AA. But the chief change was a section of personal stories, which was expanded to reflect AA's fellowship growth. Bill's story, Dr. Bow's nightmare, and other personal history from the first edition were retained intact, and 3 were edited, and 1 was retitled. New versions of 2 stories were written with new titles. 30 complete new stories were added, and the story in the section was divided into 3 parts under the same heading that are used now. One big change in the second edition was Doc's opinion was moved to page 1. I mean, it was moved away from page 1. Originally, Doc's opinion started on page 1 and was pushed back to the Roman numerals, and they put Bill's story on page 1. Originally, the original plan was to put Bill's story as the first story in the back of the book in the second edition, but then Bill changed his mind and decided he wanted it on page 1, and he stood pretty hard on it. I wish they would have kept it the way it was, because its stock being so important. And one thing that was discussed as far back in the early 40s is always shifting those stories, even Bill's story, out of the book. I like Bill's story in the book, but I mean, Bill's story is a perfect lead into the solution, and that's something what they looked at. So I can go either way on it. I'm going to read from, you won't find this in this book. This is from the preface of the second edition. Now, I believe with the 4th or 5th printing, they took this out because it was kind of controversial. So hear this. And this is 1960-ish right here, 61, 62. And when they put this in there, so they added some stuff to it. So it is, and they took it out quietly. But it says, but the personal history section has been considerably revised and enlarged in order to present a more accurate representation of our membership as today. When the big book was first printed, here's what I want you to hear. We scarcely had 100 members all told, and every one of them was an almost hopeless case of alcoholism. This has changed. A now helps alcoholics in all stages of the disease. It reaches into every level of life and to nearly all occupations. Our membership now includes many young people, women who were first very reluctant to approach AA, have come forward in large numbers. That part's cool. I like that part. But therefore, the range of the story section has been broadened so that every alcoholic reader may find a reflection of himself there. It's very interesting. I believe the line where it says help all stages of the disease. There was an argument about that, and they eventually took it out. Sure, anyone can join A, but the book is written for a real alcoholic, period. And this paragraph is an example of the changes they were trying to ease in there. And they're still going through growth, and this was taken out in the completely, like, somewhere in the middle printings because people felt it didn't come off right. People read it wrong. I could see that. Back to the book. In the third edition, part 1, Pioneers of AA, was left unchanged. 9 out of the stories in part 2, they stopped in time, were carried over from the second edition. 8 new stories were added in part 3, nearly all lost, and 8 stories were revised and were new. The fourth edition includes 12 concepts of world service. Check that out when you can. And revises 3 sections of personal stories as follows. One new story has been added to part 1, and 2 that originally appeared in part 3 have been repositioned there. 6 stories have been deleted. 6 of the stories in part 2 have been carried over, and 11 new ones have been added. 11 taken out. Part 3 now includes 12 stories, 8 which were removed, blah, blah, blah. All changes made over the years in the big book, as members found a nickname for this book, have had the same purpose to present the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately, thereby to reach more alcoholics. That's the only time in this book where you see the word big book mentioned, right there in the preface. If you have a drinking problem, we hope that you may pause in reading the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. More important, yes, I felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too. Boom. And it's one of the beauties, of taking another through this program in this book. And that's one of the beauties of it is there's someone, where they say, that's me. There's something about that moment when an alcoholic finally knows what an alcoholic is. And it creates a bond and connection that even if the person doesn't do this, I bumped into a homeless guy the other day. I took him to the first 3 steps and he's like, hey man, I remember you, and he ain't all there no more, but I bring him food and he still remembers me, and I remember the first time I sat down with another person, another drunk, and saw hopelessly in their eyes as they described years of failed attempts at sobriety. I asked, do you know what an alcoholic is? And it was like all over the place, everywhere. Nothing was correct. Nothing. But I'll never forget the humility that came in that man's eyes when he reread Doctor's opinion. And he's like, that's me, that's me. From hopeless to hopeful. And I watched this scared, frail man's eyes light up as he realized this program would work. Same exact thing happened when I took a heroin addict through Doctor's opinion. People told me, oh, they're not going to relate to it. And I just read it. I didn't even, because I didn't do heroin, but I read it. And the guy goes, that's me, that's me, that's me. And it blew my mind. There's a reason why all these programs, Cocaine Anonymous and Drug Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous, they use the big book. Because that's me, that's me. I mean, I wouldn't be here today if it was not for those moments that happen. And thank God for my sponsor to show me, patience, tolerance, love, and compassion, because it rubbed off on me. That's what, that's what I have for others today. And that's what's beautiful about this. But taking others through the steps is the greatest gift that I could offer anyone. There's no greater gift. You show me that the physical, mental, and spiritual components of a person's life are equally connected. All of it's connected. And I mean, where else could we experience, that? I mean, this is the coolest program that's ever existed. You know, I mean, just today I did inventory on some fears I had, and I realized how ridiculous it sounded. And when I went with the guy, and I felt so much better afterwards. I just did yoga afterwards, and I was like, man, this is a cool program. That's enough out of me. But next week we're gonna look into the forwards. So I'm gonna stop recording. Give me 1 second.